Hello and welcome back. What we're going to do now, we're going to install the QFX switches onto GNS3. So we're carrying on exactly where we left off on the last video. So if I get my images up and scroll back to the downloads part, you see we have our two images here. We have our QFX routing engine and our QFX packet forwarding engine. So what we're going to do, we're going to import those and we're going to see if we can get that up and running. So exactly the same as what we've done with the VMX, we're going to click on Edit and then Preferences, and we're going to go down to QEMU VMs and click on New. So I'm going to name this the QFX and put it as routing engine and click on Next. Now you can get away with 1 gig on these images. I'm just going to give them 2 for the fun of it, and I'm going to choose Telnet again, and I'm going to click on New Image and browse to where the images are. So that should be, let's have a look in downloads. There we go. Fantastic. So we want the QFX routing engine, which is this one right here. I'm not, as you notice, I'm not going to rename it. I'm just going to pop it in straight as it is. And click open. And it'll take a moment and then it'll ask me, do I want to save it to the directory? Yes, I do. And now it's imported the QFX routing engine. That's fantastic. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to edit this and we're going to have a look and change the amount of network adapters and the amount of CPUs. So I'm going to go 2 CPUs, and network adapters I'm going to go, I want 12, I'm going to go say 14. That will give me 12 adapters plus the FXP plus the internal. So that sounds fantastic to me. Okay, and now I'm going to leave the type to the Intel Gigabit E1000. This image and the packet forwarding engine as well should work absolutely fine on these Giga Ethernet adapters. However, we will see if it doesn't. So I'm going to configure the custom adapters here just so I know where I'm up to. So I know the first one is my FXP, and I know my second one is my internal link. And just because I'm really lazy, I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. Alright, now how embarrassing would that have been if I had got that sequence of numbers wrong. Alright, fantastic. So if I go back to the general settings, it's currently set to go into the end devices. Now we don't want that, this is a switch. Now if you remember with the VMX image, the routing engine is what you're configuring everything on, and where everything is connected to the packet forwarding engine. On the switches, the same as with when we done them on EVE-NG, everything is connected to the routing engine. So I'm going to change the image and I'm going to have the classic switch for this one. As I said, this is purely cosmetic, so when you're labbing, you know easily which things should be connected to what. Well, I should be under Ethernet switch. There we go. And then click OK and apply. Fantastic. So all we need to do now is to pull in the packet forwarding engine and we're good to go. Okay, so we're going to again click on New and I'm going to call this QFX PFE. So I know it's the packet forwarding engine. I'm going to click next, and you can get away with using 1 gig on this, but it's easier for me to add a 0 at the end of the 256 to make it 2 gig. But by all means, if you're limited for resources, then you can get away with just using 1 gig on this. And we're going to keep it as telnet, and we're going to use a new image. We're going to browse, and we're going to use the packet forwarding engine QCal. We're going to click open, and like before, it's going to ask, do you want to add it to the directory, which we do, and I'm going to click finish. Now I'm going to leave it as 1 CPU for this, but I'm still going to edit this, and I want this to be in the switch hierarchy, and I'm going to change the image. I'm going to let's do green. I've never used green before, so yeah. Alright, I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine in green. Good thing is you can change these any time you actually like. But you know, I've committed myself to green now, so we're going to use green. And under the network, I'm going to allocate 2 adapters. So it's going to be 1 for the management and 1 for the internal link. So I'm going to name that, and 1 for internal. Click OK. Go back to my general settings. Everything looks fine, and I'm going to click OK. And lastly, I'm going to click apply. Fantastic. Alright, so let's click OK and go into the switch section. And as we can see, we now have our packet forwarding engine, and we now have our routing engine. Now, the reason I've renamed the interfaces is when you hover over, like I'm doing there, it shows you that we have FXP and we have internal, and if I hover over, it tells us that we've got interface 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. If you don't name them, then you're going to use the stock names that come with them, and there will be times that you're going to get very confused by that. So let's connect the internals together. Fantastic. Let's make that straight, and I'm going to right click on both of them and start them up. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to pause the video for a moment while they're booting, and it shouldn't take too long. So it took around about 2.5 to 3 minutes to boot up the routing engine and the packet forwarding engine as well. So let's log in. Now again, exactly the same as when we was on EVE-NG, you'll find that when you get these images from Juniper, the QFX already has the username of root and a password of Juniper with a capital J. So let's log in and have a look. Oops, daisy. Fantastic. Okay, so CLI. Now I would believe the interfaces are not up yet. Let's have a look. No, not at the moment. And let's do a show chassis FPC. Okay, so showing that the flexible pick concentrator is not up yet, and obviously the pick itself is not up at the moment. So this will take a few minutes before the routing engine and the packet forwarding engine have communicated enough information to bring the interfaces online. I mean, by all means, you can use the EM interfaces. Let's do a show interface test again. You can use these EM interfaces if you wanted to. Yeah, I've seen many people who do actually use them completely, especially if they're using the standalone VMX image, which is the singular image. Sometimes the Giga Ethernet ports don't come up at all, and people just use the EM interfaces. That would confuse me like absolutely crazy if I was to do that. And I wouldn't like that, to be fair, but I've seen many people, many videos online on YouTube and everywhere else where they actually use them, and they work fine. You know, you don't have to have them named, but the ability of having the packet forwarding engine and the routing engine separated is so you get the best performance. So we might as well wait for that to actually come up. So I'm going to pause this for a moment and we'll wait for these interfaces to come up. It shouldn't take too long. And we have success. You may be wondering why I have 3 routing engines up at the moment. Well, for some reason the interfaces wasn't coming up on the QFX or routing engine 1, nor on the next image I booted up, but they would on the 3rd. So what I had to do to get the images up correctly so they would actually populate the correct 10 gig Ethernet Giga Ethernet ports here is on the routing engine. If I go to configure the routing engine, I had to change to para virtualized. So that I changed, and the QFX packet forwarding engine I left alone as the Intel Gigabit Ethernet. Now it took a total of about 3 minutes to boot up and to provide the correct interfaces to actually use. So what you can do now that you've found the exact configuration, now I've got other servers, you know, and they will run absolutely fine with both interfaces, both images set to Giga Ethernet. Some of them require both to be set to para virtualized. It literally depends on the type of QEMU that you're running on GNS3 and the sort of interfaces that you have inbuilt on your device. So in this one it was a little bit of trial and error. It took about 6 or 7 minutes in total to figure out exactly what it was, but now that I know, I can go here on the left hand side and I can change the template, and if I go to network I can change it to the para virtualized. So now anytime I drag out a routing engine, it's always going to have the para virtualized interface and it will come up absolutely hunky-dory. So let's stop these ones because these are now of no interest to us. They're just taking up resources, and let's delete them. So delete. Fantastic. Okay, so as we can see now, we have our routing engine, which is absolutely fine and dandy. Everything's running great on that. So we do another show interface terse. As you can see, we have our XE000 interface all the way to XE0011. And let's have a look at show chassis FPC for see what the flexible PIC concentrator is doing, and we can see that is now online and it's in testing, which is fantastic. And let's have a look at the PIC status, and as you can see, it's exactly the same in the other virtualized program we was using, EVNG. It believes that we have 48 interfaces, but of course we're not. We've only got 9 usable. Now you'll notice the exact same thing on here as when we was using EVNG, is that in the configuration though, it will have interfaces 0 to 71 plus 3 sub interfaces for each of them. So let's just do a show and scroll down a little bit. So as you can see, we have unit 0, we have dot 0 there. So what these actually are, these are serialized interfaces. So a serialized interface would be where you will have your main interface and you may have a cable, a fiber cable connected it to a breakout cassette, and it will split those interfaces down, and so it serializes them. So that's why there's basically one of the reasons why there's so many on here. But we can use the same statements as what we was using before, the wildcard delete, which is also included on here. So we've got the wildcard delete range. So wildcard delete interface XE 0/0 / square bracket 0 to 71 and enclose it in square bracket again, and that will remove all the interfaces from the configuration, and then do the same for the subunits as well. So let's have a little look. So we're in configuration mode, so let's do wildcard delete interface XE 0/0/ and it was actually, the first one was ET actually, wasn't it? If I remember rightly, ET, and it will be 0 to 71 and square bracket, and yes, we want to delete that. Fantastic. And now we're going to do the XE ones, exactly the same, and yes. And now we want to do the sub interfaces as well, so we do a colon 0 to 3 and in square brackets. Excellent, it reckons it's not found them, so let's do a show pipe compare, and as you can see, it's removing all of these interfaces. That's fantastic. And let's do a commit, and let's do another show. Actually, let's do edit interfaces and then show. We may have a couple of stragglers in there. Yeah, so again, exactly the same when we was on EVE-NG, the Ethernet 8008 stayed in there, and I think the 9 stayed in there as well. But other than that, fantastic. So we can delete those ones out manually again. So let's go top, and let's go let's do 8 to 9, 8 to 9, yes, and let's do XE 8 to 9, yes, commit. Now that should hopefully have taken all the interfaces off. Fantastic. So there you go, you're ready to rock and roll now. We've got to remember, when you're deleting these, you're removing these from the candidate configuration. I mean, the interfaces that are physically, even though it's virtualized, but are physically present, are still there. As soon as you start configuring them, like you want to configure XE000, XE003, etc., then the configuration will populate and you'll be able to use those interfaces absolutely fine. So, as I said, an amendment from the beginning, you need to make sure that the routing engine is set, at least on my configuration, to the paravirtualized. However, your mileage will vary depending on the equipment and the type of virtualization you're using. As you can see, I ran 3 sets of images until I found the configuration that worked fine. It's always only going to be the Intel Giga Ethernet E1000 or the paravirtualized. So there's nothing stopping you sitting there and setting both of them from the onset to paravirtualized. If they start working that way, fantastic. You can leave them running as that. If not, then use one of them as paravirtualized, one of them as the Intel E1000, until you get what actually works for your system. And once you find what works, all you then need to do is to right click on the actual image in your folder on the left hand side, configure the template, and set which actual network that you found works for your configuration. And there you go, you're fine then. Now I can pull out as many of these packet forwarding engines and routing engines as I like, you know, obviously bearing in mind with the amount of memory that I have, and they'll all work absolutely fine. And one thing that is really interesting with GNS3 is that you can duplicate a node. So you have to power the node off, but if I power this node off and then right click on it and I go to duplicate, we'll get an error if I do it now because the node's on, but you duplicate it and it will copy the node. So all the configuration that you've put on will automatically be copied over into a new node. So that will include things like host names, etc., users, passwords. But if you've deleted all those interfaces and you know that you want 2, 3 or 4 switches, well, just duplicate the whole lot 3 or 4 times, and you know, you're laughing. You don't have to bother putting that configuration on and deleting all those interfaces again. Little bit of a time saver. I came across that literally by accident, and it's done very well for me when I've been doing my labbing. Anyway, this video has hit 20 minutes, 21 or so. We'll catch up again on another video for the SRX security firewall, and that should be the end of the course. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you.